Members, it's past the 5-minute break that I declared. Just want the tension to, ease a bit. Now, during the break, I heard views from the two groups. Now, some members said that for the House Committee to consider the applications under Rule 91, there are different ways to deal with it. Although I have proposed to put it to a vote, but many members, although I put it to a vote, I suggested to put it to a vote. Many members said it's not necessary. So I will therefore take on board those views, and we will not put this to a vote. And now we can proceed to discuss the content of the motions under 91. And then members could express their views as to whether it's appropriate to include those motions in the council meeting next Wednesday. So since there's some confusion, I will clear the list of members asking to speak. But before that, I will invite Mr. Charles Mok and Mr. Eddie Chu to explain why you want to move motions under Rule 91, and then members could press their buttons to indicate the wish to speak. Mr. Charles Mok, please. How many minutes, please? 2 minutes? Well, but much better than 30 seconds. Now, in the past few months, there are many important items to consider in the Council. They're far more important than these very controversial amendments to the Rules of Procedure. Well, it's like what you just did, Madam Chair. It's not a bad thing just to have a cooling break or something. So as we said, it's not fair to put it to a vote, so you won't vote. You decide not to put it to a vote, fine. So that's the same. You just hold it back a while, and then there's a chance for us to consider things in a calm manner. So we're just trying to give the loyalists a chance to calm down, like what we just did. We had a break for us, so things to cool down. So that's why the reason why we're moving these motions to shuffle the order of business, because some of these items are very important. For example, we want to summons documents from the government. Now, in the past, many panels have asked questions, or members may have asked oral questions, but government never answered them. So we want to seek information from the government. Okay, let's say if the motions are voted down, and then we proceed to the discussion of the rules of procedure. Well, you were there, Madam Chair, and then we asked whether we can be given more time to deal with the dozens of amendments to the rules of procedure. So we won't even have. Otherwise, we won't even have time to read out the long title in just 10 seconds or so. So that's why. For our motions under Rule 91, that's really the purpose. It's just as you made this really wise decision just now, Madam Chair, for once. That is, you took a break so everybody could calm down a bit. Why not? It's good. Mr. Eddie Chu. I move the motion under Rule 91. Dr. Kwok Key moves the motion under 39B, under 49(1), and then Dr. K.K. Kwok, and then there are two motions to censure the President, Andrew Leung, and the House Committee Chair, Sari Lee. I want these motions to go before the motions on amendments to the Rules of Procedure. Well, I apologize for my coarse voice. Now, for these two censure motions, they target two most important persons in the Legislative Council. It has to do with the credibility or the authority of the Council. That's why these motions should go before the motions to amend the Rules of Procedure. So we must first of all address issues in relation to the authority of the Legislative Council. And before we address that, we shouldn't move on to discussion of other items. For my Rule 91 motion. It involves Andrew Leung, the president, and Sari Lee, the House Committee chair. So I believe both of them, including Madam Chair Sari Lee, you shouldn't be presiding over the meeting on this item, and you shouldn't be involved in this decision either. Mr. Ray Chan, 2 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for deciding that we will not put the matter to a vote in this under this item, because this is not really a debate. As I said earlier, the right to move motion is conferred by the rules of procedure. As long as one of the conditions in that rule is satisfied, then a motion should be allowed. Now, Andrew Leung asked you to take this up here at the House Committee. I know you are put in a difficult position. So Andrew Leung is passing the buck. I try to think up a slogan, but I can't decide yet what it is for you. So Andrew Leung passing the buck and making life difficult for Sari Lee, something like that. There's nothing negative. I could, I could have said anything about you, but this is not negative. Anyway. The right to move motion is conferred by the rules of procedure. It's not about a House Committee survey, so the majority could overrule the minority. Now, for Andrew Leung, it's easy for him to be the president. You you put two groups of people in a room. You sort it out among yourself. If you could agree on anything, I will let you move the motions under Rule 91. Otherwise, nothing is allowed. But after these motions should be moved at the council, and then they could be voted down at the council. Then we have nothing to say. But we just rely on the House Committee survey to decide whether these motions could be moved. Definitely, that's tyranny. And then you are depriving us of our right to move motions. Now I moved 50 something motions. I won't have time to cover all of them. For example, I propose that we should put the motions on the West Kowloon Cultural District first, because we're talking about a funding proposal from West Kowloon District, Cultural District, so we need to address that first. Mr. Elvin Young. Madam Chair, thank you for listening to our views. I think what Mr. Ray Chen said just now accurately reflects what's happening. They are making you the front person here among the loyalists, and it's really unnecessary for the president to do that. Now, every time there's something controversial and he passes it to the House Committee for you to do a survey here, just because then the advantage of the loyalists being the majority here at the House Committee could be taken, and then you could vote us down. Now, for the House Committee or even for the loyalists, I think it's really not fair for the president to do that to you. Now, I'm proposing to shuffle the business order. It's like as Mr. Ray Chen mentioned. Now we want to summon officials or documents, and these are similar motions. And I'm sure even the loyalists agree for this war on the rules of procedure. There are far-reaching ramifications. And in any case, with this bickering, of course, at the end, the loyalists will win. But maybe then we should allow room for us to do some real work. That is, we ask the government to produce important documents. So I hope the president will accept our recommendation. And then at the council meeting, I mentioned to Andrew Leung that is Rule 30, bracket 1 allows us to speak more than once. I asked him to allow that. So again, because you are definitely going to win, so what's so wrong? What could go wrong if you just let me say a bit more? Dr. Chen Chung Tai. About motions under Rule 91, service has been, notice has been served, so it's definitely in order. Now, the president should shoulder the full responsibility, even if he's to be condemned by the media. he shouldn't pass the buck to you, to the House and the House Committee. In the last hour or so, I saw something undesirable. I think both the Loyalists and the Pan-Democrats should not, divert put the blame on the Secretariat on any controversial matters, and I hope the Secretariat will stay neutral and serve as a referee. Now, about how we could invoke the rules of procedure, I'm referring to the legal advisor. It gives the impression that there's instruction on what to do. I think it should be the President or the House Committee Chair to take up the responsibility. Now, I must stress again, the Secretariat should be neutral. And we should, now because the Loyalists and the Pan-Democrats are locked in an argument, it doesn't mean that the Secretariat should give up its neutral stance. Now, in the past hour or so, there seemed to be that case, but at the end, you as the chairman take up the responsibility of not putting the matter to a vote, so I appreciate that, and I think we must all bear that in mind. Now, on the role of the Secretariat, very rarely I would agree with you, Dr. Zhang, but this time round I agree with you. Mr. Lam Chak Ting. Can I appeal to members of the Liberal Party to come back here as soon as possible? The former representative at this council, former House Committee Chair, Mrs. Miriam Lau, said openly that there is no need for the House Committee to consider this motions. The House Committee has no role here. So the Liberal Party should come back here and give their views. We haven't seen them at all throughout the meeting. So they must come back to the meeting. That's the first point. Second point. So far in the discussion, I never heard a member or the Secretariat say that for the content of our motions under Rule 91, whether they are in order or not. Now, if they are in order, as I said, there have been different presidents. We've got the government's president, our members' president, going through House Committee or not going through House Committee and so on. So there are various presidents. In that case, we should go by the letter of the rules of procedure. So the wordings of the rules of procedure say that either there is consent from the president or there is notice served. Now, if there must be consent from the president for anything to be moved, then there is no need to use this word "all." That means all motion must be can only be moved with the consent of the president. You can strike out the other condition. But this is not how what this rule reads. So I hope members follow that. Mr. Wong Kok Kin, 91, 97, I think those following our discussion must be really confused. There are 97 amendments. It's a huge, bulky document. Why all of a sudden there are so many motions? I think we all know why. There's no need to state it explicitly. But I have to state my views on behalf of the 5 members of the FTU. Clearly, we believe the president should maintain his. We believe the president should stand by his ruling because this ruling has a legitimate basis, so he must stand by it. Please don't disrupt me. He already made a ruling at the last council meeting, so he must stand by his ruling. He refers this to the House Committee for discussion is because he respects members. But actually, the power rests with him. he is for him to rule whether it's allowed or not. So it is entirely up to the president. But of course, if the House Committee has expressed a clear view, it would help the president is making his decision. Now, since members are so scared of voting today, and then the House Committee chair said there's no need to put it to a vote. Yes, I respect your views, Madam Chair. You know, for democracy, there is a way to express views, and voting is a way to express views. Voting would express the views of the House Committee, but since there's not going to be a vote, I want to state clearly the views of 5 members of the FTU. That is, we do not support the motions under Rule 91 to be moved. Now, if we want to get things done, we must get tools right. First of all, this council must deal with the really flawed rules of procedure before we deal with the other motions moved by members. Thank you.
Mr. Jeremy Tam. I do not agree with what Mr. Paul Chair quoted. He cited 75 brackets E11. And it says the committee may consider in such manner as it thinks fit any other item relating to the business of the council. But this is not specific in nature, but Rule 91 is very specific, so it should not fall under any other business. So Rule 75 brackets 11 should not apply. And in other words, the House Committee cannot decide on such business as it thinks fit. What it means is that the House Committee may consider other business if it's not specified in any other parts of the RP. As for the rearrangement of the council business, there are items we feel should be dealt with soon. For example, the alleged torturing by correctional services department staff, this should be raised as soon as possible. A lot of people are serving in facilities of the CSD, and we should pay attention to their situation. Another example is the arson on MTR. The incident has happened a long time ago, and the MTR Corporation never offered a proper explanation. It was claimed that they would pay a few $1 million in compensation, but there was no update since. So these items should be brought forward in order to deal with issues of public interest. And on behalf of the Civic Party, I request the chairman to accept the motions moved under Rule 91. Ms. Claudia Mo. Many people appreciate or praise Ms. Dari Lee, and there's nothing more I need to add. We have 22 members on this side, and on behalf of all these 22 members, even without strong objection, you can still get things to pass. Do not think that you would no longer be a culprit with what you did today. You are just cherry-picking on the examples relating to Rule 91. You are just cherry-picking what you like to see. And for others, you would say that they were technical issues on the railway merger. And you cited the example between Mr. Jasper Chang and Mr. Raymond Wong. Was it a formal ruling? Why weren't there any formal documents we could trace? This is a big question mark. And there's no need for you to talk about the spirit of democracy. You said it's about voting. How about having one person, one vote at LegCo and abolishing functional constituencies? The LegCo president received 0 vote. And just now some members said we do not like voting or we are scared of voting. Even the DAB Dari Lee says we would not have the voting. Does it mean she's also afraid of voting? Let's all be honest. If if 8 out of 10 people are from your side, and you say we should proceed to voting. Mr. Roy Kwong, Mr. Paul Chair suggested a vote, but he's not here now for some reason. If he's here, he might have raised a point of order to you. According to Rule 91, if we serve sufficient notice, the House Committee should not have a role to play. And you citing there was an example in June 2016 of the involving the Chief Secretary and for the railway merger. Mr. Chen Gao-fu moved a motion as well. Of course, the times are different, but the so-called practice or convention or ruling of the president, the president always stress that his decision is final. I think he might well record it in a voice recording. Even if he moved the goalposts, Mr. Paul Chair would side with him. I think we all know what is going on. And our questions are actually well justified. Mr. Jeremy Tam talked about the report of the MTR arson, which was requested by myself. We are yet to see a full report, and we want to take this opportunity to obtain more information on that case. But on the other hand, we are in a war on the amendment of the ROP, and we are trying to fight a polite war by using reason. So do you want to see the same happening every week at the Council? Mr. Wuchiwai, thank you. Mr. Wong Kwok-in asked the LegCo President to cite the previous ruling. The previous ruling cited that due to insufficient notice, the President did not allow debate on the motions, but this time, with ample notice according to Rule 19(1), the President must include the relevant items on the agenda. When you look at Rule 19 and 29, they mention the President's discretion in allowing motions, and he has no right to remove or disallow any motions. According to Rule 30, the President should either accept the original wording of the motion, alter them, or return it to the member, or return the motion to the member. So it means that members are not disallowed from moving motions. And I hope we all understand the parameters. And there are issues of interest, including the operating agreement with Hong Kong Disneyland. And James To has been following up on the report of the Lamma Island incident and the report of the umbrella movement, etc. These are issues the public would want to know more about through LegCo. So all the motions moved under Rule 91 should be admitted. Mr. Horace Chang, as I said, we are not afraid of voting. Ms. Mo said we are afraid of voting. But we just want to strike middle ground, because someone from your side do not want to have a vote. I think we should first clarify this point. For Rule 91, we support the President's ruling in his letter to the pro-democracy members, and we agree that the President should not allow such motions, having considered the views of different members. I stress that I strongly disagree with the opposition in that the chairman has no role or power. They said that the chairman has no power to include it on the agenda. If this is the case, every week when we are at the House Committee meeting in the next 4 years, we would be dealing with motions under Rule 91 every single week, and we won't have time for anything else. If this is the new norm, this would become a major weapon for filibustering. Recently, I had to write a thesis in my studies, and I told the professor that I want to study public policy, and he said it's impossible because the Legislative Council simply does not work. No matter what recommendations you have, they would not work. So even professors from the academia feel that our legislature no longer functions. So I hope we can reflect upon why we need to amend the ROP. Dr. Lena Wong. I know who that professor. Well, I want to know who that professor is. Perhaps we can have a conversation together. I also moved motions under Rule 91 to rearrange the order of business. We have spent hours on this discussion already, and I want to explain why. According under the ROP, we want to defend the legitimate rights to move motions for all legislators. It doesn't mean that we would request we would make such a request every single time, as Mr. Horace Chang said. According to the rule, there are only two conditions, and one is prior notice, and we have satisfied this requirement, or with the consent of the President. That is another condition. So would the House Committee block certain motions? We have explained why it should not be voted upon, because the pro-establishment camp would certainly veto it. And in effect, the right to make or to move motions might be vetoed by certain members. I hope the clerk can record our decision, which is to defend the right to move motions by members, and there should not be any filtering at the House Committee. Mr. Kent Leung. The function of the House Committee is to establish the order of business for the coming council meeting. So any voting would be unnecessary. If the President feels that according to the ROP or convention he can make any ruling, I think he should explain his justifications very clearly in his ruling, and he does not need to be endorsed by any other committee, because the President would have legal or other liability or responsibility. The Secretariat and legal advisors would offer professional, objective legal advice to the President. I believe the Secretariat and legal advisor would not provide advice in a way to achieve any specific outcome. This is against their professional ethics. The House Committee is an internal meeting at LegCo. in attendance of the Secretariat and legal advisors, there should be a consensus to things we do. So sometimes the President might want you to make a decision for him, but the Chairman should not impose the onus on the House Committee. This is certainly unnecessary. The logical President should bear the consequences of a correct or incorrect decision.
Dr. K.K. Kwok. Just now some loyalists said that this council cannot perform its functions. Yes, of course we see that. Our role is supposed to be to monitor the government on behalf of the people. But then you see everything that's going on, including the amendments to the rules of procedure. There's nothing normal going on here. Now, this council is not complete. There are members disqualified before these vacancies are filled, and they proceed to such a despicable act. And then they want the rules of procedure to be amended. Now, the government actually has major executive powers. Now, the loyalists may be the minority in the geographical constituencies, but they are the majority in the functional constituencies. This is an odd arrangement. There is no other country where there is a parliament and where they have functional constituencies. This is outdated. But this has become a norm in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong people can't do anything. And what's worst is that Beijing and Hong Kong are colluding so that our constitutional reform could not take place. And in this council, we're not able to block white elephant projects. There are white elephant projects with cost overrun of hundreds of billions of dollars. And then we should have had universal retirement protection, and then there should be better housing benefits and so on. And then these cannot be dealt with. So we have this flawed council, we have the mainland and Hong Kong government all colluding together, and that's what we see now. And so this is our fight against all this, and I'm not going to lie about that. Mr. Hao Strang just now said he's writing a thesis. I don't know which prominent university he studies in and which prominent professor he's studying under. But if you say that this council is totally not able to function, well, in the past few years, how many bills have been passed? The government tabled 98 bills, 23 bills were passed, so 90% of the bills have been passed. And this and over 200 items of subsidy legislation were tabled. They've all been passed. And in the past 4 years, this Finance Committee has endorsed over $200 billion worth of public spending. So these are basic statistics. I think you can take this back to this so-called prominent professor of whatever prominent university. And perhaps he could consider these basic statistics, and when you write your thesis, you could have reference to that as well. Now, the President does not have the power to so-called refer this matter to the House Committee. He shouldn't do it. Now, every time if he's not able to make a decision, and then he passes the matter to the House Committee, that means every Friday we will be having such bickering here. It's not necessary for the President to do that. If a member wants to move a motion, he certainly has the right to do so. He has absolute right to do so. There's no need for the House Committee to endorse it. It doesn't matter whether it's a motion under the Powers and Privileges Ordinance or is another motion. So that's why we make this very clear for the record. So in the past, we've been doing that, and in future we'll continue to do that. And I think that's really clear. Mr. Chen Ying, Now, President said he would like to gauge the views of members. On behalf of 5 members, we are against moving motions under Rule 91 at the Council meeting next week. Mr. Yip Kin Yun. Well, there must be a reason to do something. Madam Chair, as you know, I really resented your ruling on the 30-second speaking time. This time round, you decided not to put the matter to a vote, so I must commend you too for that. Now, there's an important issue raised at this meeting, the so-called convention. The Secretariat quoted an example involving Mr. Jasper Tsang. In 2016 April, the President wrote a letter to Mr. Wang Yukman that's not made public, and then that's considered a convention. But I think that's open to the debate. We're talking about private letter and its content. How can it become a precedent? Because the concept of precedent in the common law jurisdiction doesn't mean that whatever that's been done, then it will become a precedent. It must be something at a high level. For example, at the Court of Final Appeal or Court of Appeal, then maybe then the case is a precedent. Because that means the case has been debated repeatedly at different levels of court, and then eventually people accept that to be an authority. And only then could it become a convention. Now, in this council, we're talking about private correspondences and things mentioned there. Then they cannot be made a precedent or convention. Otherwise, in future, we may even have to refer to the President's diary. So that decision must have had been debated or been cited in the council repeatedly. Only then, and people must accept it too before it could become a convention. So what the President must do is to go strictly by the text of the rules of procedure and precedents in making a ruling. Mrs. Regina Yip, on behalf of the New People's Party, I don't support the invoking of Rule 91 to suspend Rule 18(1) so that the order of business could be shuffled. Yesterday we started our debate on the rules of procedure, and amendments to the rules of procedure are not meant to undermine members' freedom of speech or to undermine their powers to monitor the government, but rather many of the amendments are necessary. They will help to enhance the efficiency of this council. As you know, Madam Chair, every time when a meeting is aborted, we have to wait a week. Well, sometimes members say, oh, great, the meeting is over, we can all go home and have some private time. But then the taxpayers see that as a waste of money. When people meet me, they see me, they ask, how come you don't have a meeting? How come meeting is aborted? And then they ask, how come members could move motions without notice to adjourn this and adjourn that? So these rules actually are really outdated. It's so difficult for us to have started the debate, so we should finish the debate. That's why I'm against these motions under Rule 91. And then Ms. Yong Hoi-yan told me that technically there could be a problem with these motions. It shouldn't just be suspending Rule 18(1). They should also suspend Rule 19(1) because the President has the power to decide on the agenda. Mr. Lang Yu-chung, I support the motions. Now, I would like to read out the Hansard at the Council meeting of the 13th of July 2020. It was the committee stage of the Council. Now, the Rule 91 states that only the President could give consent to a motion to suspend a rule. So the President said that he would ask the Committee on Rules of Procedure to study whether this step could be saved. In other words, there is no need for the President to give consent. So members, please note that. And then what did the President say? He ordered the Council to resume, and then the President gave consent to Mr. Lang Yu-chung to move a motion under Rule 91 to suspend Rule 58(5). And the motion was put to a vote. The question was put to a vote and passed. Now, I'm not questioning the Secretariat, but the Secretariat only quoted one example. They did not quote this other example. I don't know why. It was Jasper Zhang who was the president at the time. I wonder if the Secretariat reminded the president that he made this view and he also made that decision. And before he wrote to Mr. Wong Yuk-man, did you remind him to go back to this record? That's my second point. And we would all like business to be conducted efficiently. In this council, there's just like what you did just now, Madam Chair. It avoided controversy, dispute, and so things went on well. So it's good. It's about a culture. But I mean, what the culture we can't have is for the majority to trump the minority. Now, I will ask Dr. Low Wai-kwok to speak first, and then maybe the Secretary could respond later to Mr. Leung Chiu-chung's point. Dr. Low, thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the BPA, we are not in support of moving motions under Rule 91 at the Council meeting next week. The debate on the rules of procedures already started at the Council meeting this week. Now, it's not just pro-establishment camp members who have moved amendments. The non-establishment camp members have also moved many amendments, and you could see in the debate last week they were, very enthusiastic in their participation. They, even resorted to some physical gestures to take part in the debate. So since everyone was so enthusiastic, I think we should continue with the debate. And now all of a sudden you wanted to move some motions under Rule 91 before the debate we started. I don't see any urgency. I think we should just proceed to deal with the amendments to the rules of procedure as soon as possible. Now, if you want to see what the representative view is, I think you can tell from members who have spoken. But of course, if we could put it to vote for a clear indication of our views, I don't see why not. So if we're going to vote, I will support that too. Dr. N. Chan. Madam Chair, we all know in the past few years, this council is not able to get things done. In the last term, we had a new record of aborted meetings, and we wasted the longest meeting time. Now, just now, Mr. Dennis Kwok said 98 bills were tabled, 93 bills were passed. But if there wasn't so much filibustering and so many aborted meetings, we could the government could have tabled more than 98 bills. You know how long the list is now, when we have public works subcommittee or exception subcommittee or finance committee, there's a large team of government officials waiting for their items. So we are talking about maybe you are proud that 93 out of 98 bills were passed, but there could be another 98 bills on the waiting list, actually. Just now, the Mr. Dennis Kwok was so proud about that achievement. I really resent that. Are there any other members who would like to speak for the first time? Dr. Junius Ho? Well, please press the request to speak button if you wish to speak, because there are other members who would like to speak for the second time round, so I'd like to allow members' time as far as possible. Dr. Junius Ho, well, I'm an independent member, and I'm against the motions moved by the opposition camp. You know, they moved over 99 amendments, 22 members here, moving over 90 amendments to suspend a rule under Rule 91. We all know exactly what they intend to do. Because we are now in the middle of a debate on the rules of procedure, they just want to block that debate, and so I cannot agree to that. Now, does the President have the power to decide on his own? Of course. in accordance with the rules of procedure, he has the final power in making the decision, but I appreciate that he first refers this matter to the House Committee for discussion, so we could have full exchanges of views first and full airing of our views as well. And so we all know what our stands are, and it will help actually the President when he comes to make a decision. And I don't mind too. There's no harm too if we put this to a vote. But here I just like to state my objection to these motions moved by the opposition.
Does any other member wish to speak for the first round? Dr. Elizabeth Quat, Mr. Dennis Kwok would like to speak in the second round. Anyone else? If not, I will draw the line because our time is coming to an end. Dr. Elizabeth Quat, Chairman. I want to address what the Vice Chairman, Mr. Dennis Kwok, said. He said in the past a lot of motions and budgets were passed. I think his claims were misleading. You thought you were not filibustering, and this doesn't make sense for the average public. Just to cite one example. The government wanted to implement a new communication system. The OGCIO came to LegCo many times, and it dragged on because of filibustering. For the sake of one item, he came to LegCo 14 times, and he waited and waited. He waited a few hours every time before the item was discussed and passed. So can you say that the time spent was not wasted? At the end, items were passed, but you cannot assume that the operation of the meetings have been smooth. You know, we have been running on empty, and this is just one of the examples. And it is a nightmare for government officials to come to ESC, FC, or PWSC meetings for public offices waiting next doors. Can their time be better spent on somewhere else? Do we really have to waste their time? Every time we have an ESC, FC, or PWSC meeting, are the questions asked really sensible and necessary? Are you filibustering or are you asking meaningful questions? I think this is clear for everyone to see. Mr. Dennis Kwok, second round. If members wish to solve filibustering by amending the RP, I can only say good luck. I want to point out that at the House Committee, we have no right to decide whether members would put motions at LegCo. That can only be decided by Council. I don't want to create an impression that the House Committee can reject or disallow the moving of any motion at the Council. This is something I must reiterate. Whether or not we use a vote to express our views, this is just a manner of expressing our views. This is not the same as depriving. This doesn't mean that members' right to move motions would be deprived. They can continue to do so. And the House Committee's role is not to veto the right to move motions by members. But when there was controversy, the House Committee often resorted to voting. But today we have spent an hour on issues relating to point of order to ensure the smooth running of the meeting. I think allowing members to just offer their views can achieve the same purpose. And we hope that we can have a relatively sensible discussion for the remainder of the meeting. And my proposal was accepted by members, so I'd like to thank everyone. Ms. Asmak, would you like to express your views? I've drawn the line, but I would allow you to speak. Chairman, we know that for the 97 proposals, the purpose is related to the ROP. Recently, many members said even when the ROP is amended, the problems can still continue and the filibustering can still continue. And I agree, because they can come up with other ways. At council meetings, FC or HC meetings, as for issues on point of order, they can go on for an hour. For these 97 proposals, how much time did we spend on the actual point of order? So raising point of order becomes a tool for filibustering. If they continue to filibuster, we can only do our best by plugging the current loopholes in the ROP. So they should not. There's nothing we can do. If they want to keep filibustering, we can only do our best to plug these loopholes. And these 97 proposals serve to filibuster, so we would certainly object to them. I hope the President can make a bold decision to ensure the smooth running of the Council. The Secretariat, there were criticisms of the Secretariat's selection of materials, so I must allow them to respond. Secretary General, thank you. I would speak briefly before I invite the Assistant Secretary General to explain the details. All along, the Secretariat has been professional and independent in serving all Legislative Council members. Some members moved motions under Rule 91 to suspend a rule. The selection of examples by us encompass different time periods. But first of all, I must point out that the suspension of rules under Rule 91 is not common. As for government motions and members' motions, according to the basic law, they must be dealt with separately. Members cannot move a motion under Rule 91 to rearrange the order of government motions, and the government cannot move motions under Rule 91 to rearrange the order of members' motions. The moving of motions under Rule 91 to rearrange the order of business in the past they were made with the permission of the House Committee Chairman, with the consent of the majority of HC members. Without obtaining the consent of other members, the HC Chairman had never, the President has never approved such motions, and the practice of the current President is in line with past practice. And in his reply to members, he said he would consider the views of members at the House Committee meeting and whether there is a consensus in before making his ruling. As the legal advisor said, the President is empowered by Rule 19 of the ROP in deciding the agenda. The President will consider the views of House Committee members on these 90-odd motions moved under Rule 91. I now invite the Assistant Secretary General to speak. Dora, please. I want to address what Mr. Leung said. Since time is limited, I cannot explain at depth, but I hope I can explain the issue in a gist. As I said earlier today, and your motion moved under Rule 91 serves to suspend 58(5) for consideration at the whole council. The order of the order has been listed in Rule 58(5), but for bills, certain amendments would be jointly debated, and some the order might be skipped in some cases. So the mover would be allowed by the president to move a motion under Rule 91 to suspend a rule so that the relevant provisions can be debated in one go. We have plenty of examples. Before 2011, there were plenty of examples in which the president allowed motions moved under Rule 91. The then president requested the Committee on RP to streamline the procedure and to save time. And in February 2011, they completed the review, and the amendments were approved at the council in March 2013. In 2011, and subsequently there were no new motions moved under Rule 91. If you wish to see more information, please feel free to contact the Secretariat. Secretary General, do you have anything to add? Just now, the Assistant Secretary General said the president allowed members to make motions under Rule 91 in the committee stage. It was a technical arrangement, and it could not be compared to the situation now. The ROP has been amended, and as such, Rule 91 no longer needs to be invoked to deal with the scrutiny of legislation, which is a technical issue. I hope members would follow the analysis of the Secretary General of the Secretariat. The Secretariat gathered much information on past practice and convention. Mr. Chen Kin-po, can we have another 10 minutes because Mr. Peter Shiu would like to speak. I would allow him to speak before we conclude. Thank you very much. Mr. Peter Shiu, I will be quick. The Liberal Party is against the motions under Rule 91. If we have no any other business, the meeting is adjourned. For this final issue, the Secretariat would honestly and professionally record and reflect the views of members, and the President will make reference to such views before making his decision on the Council next week. Thank you very much.